The 20th Israeli parliament that recently dissolved ahead of the snap elections called for April was one of the most feisty sessions the country has ever seen. Some say it broke records of vulgarity that certainly did not make its reputation any better, and no one saw all of it more up close than the man I have the honor to now talk to, Speaker of the Israeli Parliament, Yuli Edelstein. Speaker Edelstein, thank you very much for joining us again on the Spin Room. It's good to have you back.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Before we get to what happened in the Knesset, I want to talk about the news today, the death of Moshe Arens, a former defense minister 3 times, foreign minister. He was called the gentleman of Israeli politics by quite a few people in the country. What's your reaction to his passing?
Sad news, obviously, and I think that we are talking here about someone who was an intellectual, an engineer, diplomat, leader, a real statesman. And I think that for me, he would always be an example of how an elected official should look like, doing things from deep knowledge and deep understanding of the processes. And I can't resist the temptation to say on a personal note that upon my release from prison and getting the permission to emigrate to Israel from the former Soviet Union 30-something years ago already, the first cable I got was from
Moshe Arens?
From Israel, and the telegraph lady in the former Soviet Union obviously thought it was some mistake. It said Moshe Arens. So she changed it for something a little bit more familiar to her. Misha Rens. Rens was a capital letter.
That's
so
fantastic.
That's why I have the perfect right to always call him Misha and not Moshe.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that, and he will sorely be missed. But you talked about him being, an elegant politician. Let's talk a bit about what you witnessed in your 4 years now as Speaker of the Parliament. Some of the worst behavior from, a lot of it came from your party, from the Likud. Somewhat a good representation of bad behavior, particularly, for example, a member of Knesset, Arens, for just recently calling one of the other of his colleagues of Ethiopian descent a token immigrant, calling a disabled person a half-human. Do you feel like you succeeded in reining these people in?
I think the obvious answer is that the outgoing Knesset, as you rightly mentioned, would be probably remembered for its vulgarity in terms of the tones there. It came, unfortunately, from what Americans call both sides of the aisle, including from my own party. I won't deny that. And I sincerely hope that in the coming elections, the Israeli public, the Israeli people, will send better representatives to the Knesset from the left and the right, religious and secular.
Do you wish him success, Arens, in his re-election bid?
I wish Israeli public representatives who would be serious, who would take example from Moshe Arens. The views can be, in some cases, even marginal views, but the behavior, I think, is part of the message.
You mentioned the other side of the map. You recently tweeted about 2 Arab lawmakers, Hanin Zoabi and Jamal Zakhalka of the Joint List, who recently announced that they won't be in the next parliament. And you said, without Zoabi and without Zakhalka and with God's help, without all of Balad, that's a faction inside the Joint List, this party contributes nothing to the Knesset. On the contrary, it harms the entire Israeli public. Is it just Balad, that faction, that you have a problem with, or is it the whole Joint List?
I'm one of those who still believe in the possibility of real coexistence between Jews and Arabs in this country. But what people sometimes miss is the fact that it's very nice, and it's very important, by the way, to work in education and meetings and encounters between people in order to create this coexistence. But the indivisible part of bringing coexistence closer is fighting those who oppose coexistence. And Balad is a very good example of those who ideologically oppose coexistence between Jews and Arabs. They don't recognize the state of Israel. They don't have any mutual vision with me or my colleagues from ultra left-wing liberal
parties. But as lawmakers, do you have any issues with how they used to be as lawmakers? Because a lot of their work was also for the benefit of not only for Arabs in Israel and for Jews in Israel.
Unfortunately, I can't agree to that. There are members of Knesset on the Joint List who are perfect lawmakers. They spend a lot of time in the plenary session. They are doing good work. And by the way, they, with all the restrictions and with all the, unfortunately, statements that we hear sometimes, they're bringing coexistence. This was not the case with Balad, and as I said in my tweet, I think that the Knesset will be better and the coexistence in Israel will be better without these people.
Let's look ahead at the elections that are coming ahead in April. Let's discuss what the Likud has accomplished, and let's talk about security. We'll start with that. You know, there's been a round of violence in Gaza with Hamas calling the shots when to start and stop shooting. They were even rewarded with millions of dollars, Qatari dollars, a transfer that Israel, that your government allowed to happen. There are Hezbollah tunnels in the north, Iran now on Israel's northern border, a spike of terror attacks recently in the West Bank. In short, your government, you, haven't really brought more security to Israelis, have you?
I think that the security, as far as the security of citizens is concerned, is in good place in Israel. With all the problems that you mentioned, I think that we have new neighbors in the north, namely Iranians, and this is a very dangerous situation that we are trying to cope with. And the Israeli government, I think the position of most Israeli parties here, definitely of the government and the Prime Minister, is very clear. We won't tolerate any Iranian presence and any attempts of the Iranians to base themselves on the Syrian territory. In the south, as far as the Gaza Strip is concerned, obviously the parameters are once again very clear. We are fighting Hamas. We are doing everything possible in order to secure, to make life of Israelis in the south more secure. At the same time, I don't think that in Gaza we are facing 2 million terrorists. We are facing civilian population, and we have to make sure that they at least will be able to keep the head above water there.
And speaking of the conflict with the Palestinians, it looks like these elections have put the long-awaited Trump plan even more, shall I say, on hold. Does that disappoint you?
No, I think that there is no shortcut as far as the situation in the Middle East is concerned. We have to work towards, once again, coexistence. We have to work towards cooperation. We have to fight to combat terrorists of all types in the north and in the south, and it's, as I've said, part of our attempts to bring coexistence and cooperation here in this area. Having said that, I don't think that anyone has the scissors to come and cut the map in a very neat way and get the perfect situation here in the Middle East. It's just not going to happen, and I think that we have to start thinking out of the box, because all these statements about 2 states for 2 people and the only solution is a 2-state solution, they just don't work. You know, everyone tried to
So there'll be 1 state.
You know what? We have to honestly start rethinking and think together what exactly is it we're going to reach.
Well, why don't you use the elections to come with a platform, with an agenda? Because it doesn't seem like not only the Likud, but any leader is coming with an agenda about how to solve this.
Because that's exactly what I said a second ago. There are no shortcuts, and coming with new slogans, you know,
a plan, sometimes, any kind of plan.
Sometimes people say to me, but what's your plan? I say, give me half an hour in the laptop, I'll give you 5 plans. The only problem is you can't implement them under present conditions. The plan is right now to create cooperation in different fields in order for a change to build the pyramid in the right way. We have to build the platform first and then start on it building future plans.
Another thing that happened on your watch is deterioration with the relations with the Jewish diaspora, particularly in the United States. I want to quote a recent op-ed in the New York Times by Jonathan Weissman, a deputy D.C. editor of the paper. He says, now many American Jews, especially young American Jews, would say Israel is Israel's problem. We have our own. There are roughly 6.5 million Jews in Israel. There are roughly 5.7 million Jews in America. Increasingly, they see the world in starkly different ways. The Great Schism is upon us. He's calling it the Great Schism. This happened on your government's watch.
I think we're talking here about a process that unfortunately I know very well in my previous capacity as Minister of Immigrant Absorption and then Minister of Diaspora Affairs in different Israeli governments. And yes, if you ask me whether it bothers me, it does. I don't want to see this gap widening. But having said that, this basic assumption that people so easily come with, well, Israel, because of its policy, because of its ultra-orthodoxy, because of this and because of that, alienates Jews in the diaspora. Now, I have one simple question. We know a program called Birthright, meaning Jewish youth, for the first time in their life, in most cases not exactly affiliated with the Jewish community or whatever, they come to Israel, and in 10 days they totally...
But apparently it's not working. Because you know, young American Jews aren't feeling closer to Israel.
First of all, but that's exactly the thing. According to all the polls, those who were on birthright, those who had been on birthright, start feeling differently about Israel. So, meaning Israel is a positive message.
Okay.
I think that we all have to check what's going wrong here, because it's very nice to hear from rabbis and educators in the United States. No, as far as we are concerned, everything's fine. It's your problem. We all have to start thinking what goes wrong.
The Prime Minister's legal problems. There are reports that the Attorney General, Avichai Mendelblit, is going to decide next month already about whether he will do a hearing before deciding to indict or not indict. The Prime Minister is very vocally against that. What's your reaction to all of this? 64%, by the way, there's a poll that recently came out, 64% of the Israeli public want the Attorney General to make a decision before the elections.
My position has been clear from the very beginning, long before the early elections. I think that we had to leave this whole case to Mendelblit, to our legal advisor, in this case the chief prosecutor, and let him decide when and how he comes out with official statements. Unfortunately, what developed was first demonstrations, ugly demonstrations in front of his house, organized not by Likud, but by the opposition, including chasing the legal advisor into his synagogue on Shabbat, with shouting at him.
That's the past, though. If he is indicted, though, do you want him to step down?
I think that legally he doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to, but morally, I'm asking you, is it good for Israel to have a prime minister sitting while he has an indictment over his head?
It's a totally theoretical discussion. I think that we have...
It's not that theoretical anymore, sir.
Absolutely, it's theoretical because for the last 2 or 3 years already, more than 2 years, obviously we are being asked that question. I want to first see what the legal advisor comes with. Another
election issue, the right is becoming a bit more fragmented after Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked left the Jewish Home Party. Now have the new right party. I want to show you a quote from Boaz Bismuth, the editor-in-chief of Yisrael Hayom, Israel's most widely circulated newspaper, saying, while the left bloc is currently fed more on archaeology and less on ideology and seeks to produce cement from nothing, the right-wing bloc must present a united and common front. The natural place for Bennett and Shaked is with the Likud. Are you for a unification with the new right, with Naftali Bennett?
I think that all these technical tricks in order to win the elections are not working. I think that Likud has the potential of being really the uniting large party of all the moderate right-wing forces in this country.
So you wouldn't be against it?
I would be against, as I've said, all the pre-election tricks of reserved slots for this or that party.
Now, so that means you would be against it because that's what would have to happen.
First of all, I, from my experience, know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We started as an independent party many years ago, and then we merged with the Likud without demanding any reserved slots. We ran in the primary elections. Thank God, my dear good friend and colleague Natan Sharansky and myself got re-elected within the Likud. I can promise you that all these people you're talking about have a good chance to be re-elected if they run in the primary elections.
20 seconds before we go, do you want to be Speaker of Parliament again?
First of all, I have to succeed in the primary elections. Then we have to win the elections, which is not going to be easy with all the,
do you want the job?
With all the situation. And then I would be very happy to continue in my job.